Hello class, this lecture is going to focus on Hebrew verbs. And what we're going to do in this lecture is look at chapter 12 of the Basics in Biblical Hebrew textbook. And we're going to introduce the verbs. So we're not going to learn all of the intricate details. Those are going to come in the chapters that follow this, and are going to be the next several chapters within the textbook. But what we're going to do today is just look at verbs. Verbs can be some of the most difficult things to learn in Hebrew and really in any language. So as we begin this, what I want you to do is I want you to think about the things that we've learned. And I want you to, where there are similarities, I want you to be able to correspond to those types of similarities. So we've looked at things that can prefix to words. We've looked at things that can suffix to words or begin at the beginning of words and be attached at the end of words. The same things are going to happen as we study Hebrew verbs. And there's going to be some similarities and then some differences between those things. And we're going to see differences in word order, just like we've seen with the word order that we've looked at as we've looked at phrases and the construct chain and different things like that. And so I want you to be prepared that you're going to find out that there are similar things to those, and then there are going to be some extra things that we need to take into account when we're learning Hebrew verbs. And please don't hear me saying that those things are the same. I'm just saying that we see patterns in those things that we're going to see carry over into Hebrew verbs. In this lecture, we're going to look at what a root of a Hebrew word is, so that we can identify the verb, the word being used in the verb. We're going to look at person, number, and gender. We've already seen those concepts before, so that should just be a review. We're going to talk about the different verbal stems. We're going to talk about how to conjugate verbs, or the verbal conjugations. We're going to talk about what a strong verb is and what a weak verb is, and briefly how to identify those. But we're going to spend a lot of time in future lectures on identifying those. And then we're going to talk about word order within Biblical Hebrew. So when we say kind of what a root is in a Hebrew word, it's those main characters, those main letters that make up a word. In Hebrew, most of the time, the root of a word is going to be 3 characters or 3 consonants. The textbook talks about this as being triconsonantal. There are a small amount of verbs that are only 2 consonants, biconsonantal, but most of them are going to be 3. The root contains the basic semantic information of the word, and you're going to see parallel between words. You're going to see parallels in synonymous type of terminology between words that share a common root. So, for instance, we've seen the word melech before, the mem, lamed, kaf there. And then look at the word melkah. It's got the same root, the mem, lamed, kaf. And then you've got malkuth, which is the word for kingdom, also the same root. Mamlekah, dominion. And then we've got Maluka, kingship or royalty, and then we've got the verb malak, which is to reign or to be king. So you can see that root carries that ruling, reigning, royalty type of idea: king, queen, kingdom, dominion, kingship, royalty, to rule, to reign. So that is what a root is going to look like in a word, and we're going to see different roots even in the vocabulary this week. We've already talked about this idea of person, gender, and number. So when we talk about verbs and different things like that, we're going to say like it's a third common singular. So a third person, common, and then singular verb. Or we might say that it's a third masculine plural, or a third feminine singular, or something along those lines. So the first, second, and third is referring to person, I, we, right? You for second person, he, she, it, they for third person. Gender is either masculine, feminine, or common. And when we're talking about it, we'll often just say like M for masculine, F for feminine, and C for common. Common refers to subjects that are neither grammatically masculine nor feminine. Obviously, masculine and feminine refer to subjects that are grammatically either masculine or grammatically either feminine. So then we've got number, singular, and plural, referring to one person, singular referring to more than one person, plural. That should just be review. But when we talk about Hebrew verbs, we're going to use all of those categories: third, common, plural, or something along those lines when we look at a verb. And we'll talk about that and we'll look at that more in future chapters, in future lectures. In Hebrew, there are 7 main or basic stems that connote action, right? And so when we talk about those different stems, we will we're gonna talk about the names of those, and as you go along further in the textbook, you'll see that these are discussed in great detail. There's the cal stem, which is the most common stem. And when we talk about stem names and different things, and when we're talking about stems in Hebrew, they connote kind of a verbal action, which can be simple, causative, or intensive. We'll talk about that in more detail. Or a verbal voice, which can be active, passive, or reflexive. So, for instance, the Hithpael stem can be reflexive in nature. So can others. But so the cal or the call stem is the most common. It's what is called an unaugmented stem, which means things don't really attach beyond what the verbal form is going to require. There's the nithal stem, that you're going to have the noon attach, and then a pathic or a pathak vowel attached later. So nifal. So the hithial stem is going to have the hey with the hiric prefix, and then you're going to have the hiric yod later on. Then the hofal stem, you're going to have the hey with the kemetz hatuf, and then you're going to have the short A class vowel there, the pathak vowel. The PL is going to have a hiric underneath the first letter, and then a tsere underneath the next character. It will often also double that middle radical in but we'll see that as we talk about as you see the PL stem later on in the textbook. The pual stem has a kibbutz pathic vowel pattern, and then the hithpael stem has a hith at the beginning, and then a tsere later on under that second radical, or the second consonant within the root. If I use the word radical, that's what I mean. I just mean the consonant within the root. So if I say it's the first one, it's the first, second, or third, right? So if I say second, it's second. If I say the third, it's the third. So first, second, third. So Hebrew verbal stems, they have kind of what we call stem values, where we talk about simple action, causative action, and intensive action. And then we've got different types of voice: active, passive, and reflexive voice. So you can see how each of those stems lines up with each of these. So if you use the cal stem, it's usually called kind of just like the generic stem. It's when you want to convey basic information. So you might say, like in the cal stem, you might say break, whereas in the PL stem, since it has intensive action, it might be like shattered, right? Like he shattered something, or he broke to pieces. The hithial would be like broke through or made a breach. With the passive voice, the nifal is going to be like was broken. The pual is going to be something like was shattered. And then the reflexive voice might be something like that, like it shattered itself, right? So the word to like wash or to clothe one's self has this kind of reflexive idea to it. So he clothed himself. I hope that, again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time thinking about each one of those, because we're going to be looking at them in successive chapters within the textbook. So here is the word to hear in Hebrew, so you can get a sense of what this would look like with that word to hear. In the cal stem, the word would be he heard. In the nifal stem, it would be he was heard. He was heard. And the hithial stem, so you've got this word to rule or to reign. And the hithial stem, it's he made such and such a person king, right? And the hofal stem, it was he was made king. So hithial, right? He made a king. And the hofal, he was made king. The word to smash in the PL, like he smashed something, right? And the pual, it was smashed. And then the hithpael, he hid himself, like Adam hid himself from God. It's reflexive in nature. So when we talk about Hebrew, so that's the stems in Hebrew. Those are the 7 basic stems. There are a few more other than that are very infrequent within Hebrew, but those are the 7 most frequent ones. There are also different conjugations. Sometimes these are referred to as forms as well in other Hebrew grammars. So when we talk about Hebrew conjugations, we've got the perfect. This is suffixed, which means things are going to appear at the end of a word with the perfect. And this is used for a completed action in the past, present, or future. But when you think about the perfect, think about most of the time in Hebrew narrative or something along those lines, it's going to be simple past. Not always, but completed action in either past, present, or future, but often the gloss of it is going to be simple past. Imperfect, or the prefixed conjugation, is one of the 2 main verbal conjugations along with the perfect. The imperfect is going to be talk about an incomplete action in the past, present, or future. And when you've got the imperfect, it's most frequently just in its normal form going to be translated in the future tense. Imperative is a command, so it's going to command somebody to do something. An infinitive construct are the 2 be kinds of things, so to study, to read, to eat. You've probably heard somebody say a split infinitive, and split infinitives are bad or something along those lines. And there's a very famous split infinitive, to boldly go. Well, if you don't want to split the infinitive, you'd say to go boldly, right? So, but there's the infinitive construct. There's the infinitive absolute, which highlights kind of the verbal action. It may be used also in the place of an imperative. And then we've got the participle, which is kind of like a verbal adjective. It's describing having both verbal and adjectival characteristics, talking about something that is someone who is studying or learning or judging or something along those lines. So when we talk about thinking about Hebrew roots, those 3 main characters that often make up a word, since most of them are going to be triconsonantal, which we talked about. There are 2 types of roots that we often talk about: strong and weak roots. So strong and weak roots. Strong roots are going to follow a really clear pattern as long as they've got what are called strong radicals or strong letters within them, strong consonants within them. But there are a lot of weak roots, so a lot of weak kind of letters. The gutturals, resh, yod, and nun, are considered to be weak characters or weak consonants. So when those appear in a word, they might drop off. They might not double, like we know that the gutturals and resh don't double, so there's often either virtual doubling or compensatory lengthening. We've talked about that before. And so when you've got a stem that likes to double something, likes to put a dagesh in a letter, that's not going to happen. So we're going to have instead happening like the virtual doubling or the compensatory lengthening. So gutturals, resh, yod, and nun. Nun likes to drop off, for instance. The weak verbal roots include biconsonantal, so with only 2 consonants, and the geminant, which are going to have the 2nd and 3rd radical duplicate. So we're going to talk about identifying strong perfect, cal perfect in particular, and strong cal imperfect words in the chapters that are coming up right after this one. So just know that when we talk about strong and weak roots, when we talk about strong roots, it's roots that don't have gutturals, resh, yod, or nun in them. When we talk about weak roots, it's roots that have those letters in them, or at least some mixture of those letters in them. So when we talk about, there's a lot of different classifications for weak verbs. There's the first guttural. So where you've got a guttural in that first position, obviously here the example is the word amad. And it could have a different root than this. It could have an aleph there, just as long as it was a guttural. Second guttural, again, you've got an aleph in that second position. Third chet or ayin, and you've got one of those 2 is going to follow. Those 2 are going to follow a similar pattern. The third aleph is going to follow a slightly different pattern. Then the third chet or ayin. The third hey is going to follow yet another pattern that's going to happen, especially as you get into those different conjugations. The first yod is when the yod is in the first position. And there are a lot of words that start with yod, too, which makes it even more complex. The first noon is another type of verb classification. And then we might talk about a doubly weak root. So like a first guttural and a third hey is one example. So you've got multiple of those weak letters in there. And then a biconsonantal. So here we've got the word com or kum, right? And so what we've got going on there is just a weak root or a geminant, like the word savav. All right. So all of those things aren't important that you memorize them. Just know that they're being introduced here. We're gonna drill down on those. We're gonna look at those more closely in the chapters that follow. So this is just bringing this information to your mind. Just think about it, and then know that we're going to be applying it in future chapters. One of the most challenging things about any language can be word order. Word order is different in most languages. Even if you know modern languages, many modern languages use different word order than English, right? So if you know French or Spanish, or if you know another ancient language, like if you've taken Greek, you'll notice that the word order in Greek is different than it is in English, is different than it is in Hebrew. And so in Hebrew, though, there is a normal word order. It doesn't always follow this, but it's normally this way, where you've got the verb, and then you've got the subject, and then you've got the object or more than one object. So here we're going to, part of Genesis 1:1, it's taking off the word Bereshit, which is in the beginning, which is just a kind of an identifier. But here you've got the word bara, which is the verb. So bara, and then Elohim, God. So that word bara is the third masculine singular, right, of bara, which is a third aleph verb. So it just means he created. And then it's got the subject. Well, who did the creating? Well, Elohim did. God created. So it says God created. Bara Elohim says God created. That's how we would express this idea in English. It doesn't say he created God. It says God created because bara is the verb, and then the subject of that verb is Elohim. God created. Et, so that's the object marker, the definite direct object marker, if you recall from previous lessons. Et hashamayim, the heavens, right? You see the definite article there with the pathak or pathak vowel with the dagesh in the first position of the word. So hashamayim, the heavens. Wa'et, definite direct object marker with a vav conjunction on the front of it. Haaretz. Right? Again, you've got the definite article there. Since it's an aleph, it can't double, so you've got lengthening going on within the vowel, and then the vowel under the aleph is going to match it. Va'aretz, or haaretz, which is the earth or the land. So if we were to read this from the beginning of the verse, it's Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim wa'et haaretz, which is God created the heavens and the earth. God created the heavens and the earth. So you've got the verb first, then the subject, then the object or objects. So if you see the textbook referring to VSO, it's talking verb, subject, object. In English, we usually do subject, verb, object. So we would say God created the heavens and the earth. They say created God the heavens and the earth, and it's God created the heavens and the earth. So when we think about parsing Hebrew verbs, we're thinking about the stem, thinking about the conjugation, we're thinking about the person, gender, number, and then the root of that verb, also known as the lexical form. So here you've got that word shama as the root, right? But we've got this word nishma. This is a nifal, and we know that it's a nifal because it's got that noon in the first position, and then it's got the patak vowel kind of in that middle radical there. So you've got, this is a nifal, perfect, third masculine singular, so third person masculine in gender, and then singular in number. From the lexical form or the root, Shema. The lexical form is going to be Shema, and then we would just say Shema as we're talking about the root as well. So that's what we're going to talk about when we talk about parsing verbs, which we're going to be doing in future chapters. So parsing a verb is identifying the stem, the conjugation or the form, the person, gender, number, and then lexical form or verbal root of the word. So before you move on, don't think that you have to memorize everything. You don't have to. This is just a general introduction of the stuff that the verbs are talking about. And except for the vocabulary, just know that all of these things are going to be mentioned again. So let's look at some vocabulary. So here you're going to have that lexical form, the normal kind of root as we're talking about it. So the word akal is the word to eat. So here you've got a first guttural, right? Because it's guttural in that first position. And then you've got the word amar, which is to say or to. So notice if you see the Q, it means from the cal stem. If you see the NI, it means from the nifal stem. The HI, the hiphil stem. The PI, the PL stem. If you say a PU, it would be pual. Obviously, HITH is going to be the hithpile. So look at these words. It's giving you kind of how they frequently occur. So akal, if it's in the call stem, it's going to be to eat or to consume. In the nifal, it's going to be to be eaten or to be consumed. In the hiphil, it's going to be to feed. To feed. So amar, to say, to be said, to be called. Really just focus on the call or the cal stem. So amar, to say. Haya, to be, to become, to occur. Halak is to walk. This is a very common word. So look at the word hay, all of these so far. Amar, over 5,000 times. Haya, over 3,500 times. Halak, over 1,500 times. Yatsa is to go or to come out. And then to cause to go in the hifil. Yashav, to sit or to dwell, to inhabit. Nagash is to draw near or to approach. Some more verbs. Nathan, to give, to put, to place, or to set. Asa, to do or to make. Ra'ah, to see or perceive, to understand. Shama, to hear. So if you've ever heard of the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:4, that's this word. Shema Yisrael, it's an imperative. Hear, O Israel. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then we've got some other words for our vocabulary, like ak, which is only, surely, nevertheless. Al, which is a negative particle meaning no or not. Im, if, but, except, only. Bal is no or never. Lo is no or not, also spelled with the holam wow instead of just the holam. Ata, now, then, after all. Now is the most frequent. Tamid, continually. Tamid is continually. All right, so that was just an introduction to Hebrew verbs. Don't let that be overwhelming. Be sure that you're focusing on the big ideas and the big things. Just try to get each one of those different categories in your mind as we talked about them, and we'll reinforce those with each chapter on the different stems and the different conjugations as we look at them. Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of His Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in His peace.